You are fully aware of what you need to do, yet your body refuses to cooperate. You watch yourself neglect food, sleep, hygiene, and order, knowing the consequences clearly. Nothing is missing in your understanding, except access to your own actions. From the outside, this looks like laziness, failure, or not caring enough. Inside, it feels like being locked inside a body that has stopped responding. You are conscious enough to feel the damage, but powerless to stop it. Every ignored need trains your nervous system to shut you down even further. This is not a motivation problem. This is your body deciding that survival means doing nothing. If this feels familiar, it is not because something is wrong with your character. It is because the explanation you were given for this state is fundamentally incorrect. You were told this is laziness, procrastination, or a lack of discipline. Those labels describe behavior, but they completely miss the underlying mechanism. What is failing here is not your will, intelligence, or moral strength. What is failing is the connection between intention and physical action. Your nervous system is not ignoring your needs. It is actively blocking movement in order to protect you. This creates a specific form of paralysis that logic alone cannot fix. You can understand every consequence and still remain unable to act. This is not a mindset issue. It is a biological survival response running far past its expiration date. And until you see it clearly, you will keep blaming yourself for surviving. 1. Hyper-awareness without control feels like watching yourself decay. You are not disconnected from your body. You are painfully connected without the ability to intervene. You feel every signal clearly: thirst, stiffness, hunger, exhaustion, accumulating without relief or resolution. Your awareness does not fade as neglect grows. It sharpens, making the experience increasingly punishing. You watch your physical baseline slowly erode while remaining fully conscious of each incremental decline. The neck tightens, energy drops, and the environment decays, all noticed clearly in real time. Nothing is happening in the dark. Everything unfolds under a relentless internal spotlight. This is not dissociation from reality, but entrapment inside constant awareness. You understand exactly what would help because cause and effect still function perfectly. Sleep would restore your energy, food would stabilize you, and cleaning would lower tension. Yet knowing these truths does not grant access to physical action. You are not choosing to ignore your needs. You are watching yourself fail to reach them. It feels like observing a machine malfunction while the controls remain locked away. The cruelty of this state is not confusion, but clarity without power. You are aware enough to suffer deeply, but unable to correct the course. Neglect is not a choice. It is active inhibition. This state feels less like making bad decisions and more like having movement actively blocked. Your body applies the brakes with full force while the engine continues revving underneath. Energy is present, but it is being deliberately restrained by your nervous system. You are not lacking discipline. You are experiencing neurological inhibition. The inability to act is not passive or accidental. It is an active process designed to prevent movement. From the inside, it feels like floating, suspended, unable to gain traction. Entropy is allowed to take over while you remain fully conscious. Shame often appears here, but it is not the root of the problem. Shame is a byproduct, not the mechanism. The body is not failing to move. It is choosing immobility as a form of protection. This is why effort feels dangerous rather than merely difficult. Movement is registered not as helpful, but as a threat. And when movement feels threatening, stillness becomes the only safe option. 3. Why the world mislabels freeze as laziness. From the outside, people only see the visible outcomes of your internal shutdown. They see unwashed hair, skipped meals, cluttered rooms, and canceled commitments. They assume the cause must be a lack of care, discipline, or basic responsibility. The world has a very limited vocabulary for this state. They call it laziness. They call it being messy, disorganized, or careless. If they are feeling generous, they call it a rough patch. Someone suggests a planner, a habit tracker, or stronger motivation. They see the chaos in your environment and assume the input is missing effort. What they cannot see is the inhibition happening inside your nervous system. They do not feel the internal resistance that makes simple tasks feel impossible. So their labels describe appearances, not mechanisms. This misunderstanding turns a biological response into a moral failure. And once framed as a character flaw, shame replaces understanding. You begin carrying a label that was never meant for you. 4. Logical advice fails because logistics are not the breakdown. When people intervene, they usually approach the problem with high-functioning logic. They remind you that taking a shower only takes a few minutes. They explain that eating properly provides energy, as if this were new information. They offer solutions that perfectly solve the logistical problem. What they miss is that logistics are not where the system is failing. You are not confused about how to care for yourself. You are blocked from acting on that knowledge. Their advice treats the symptom as if it were the disease. When you cannot follow it, the interpretation shifts. You are no longer struggling. You are now seen as stubborn, resistant, or not wanting it badly enough. This misunderstanding creates a second layer of damage. You begin to withdraw to avoid repeated explanations and quiet judgment. Isolation forms not because you want to be alone, but because explanation is exhausting. The problem deepens, not from neglect, but from being misread. 5. Ignoring yourself is a high-energy neurological process. From the outside, it looks like you are doing nothing, sitting still, barely moving. Internally, your nervous system is working constantly to suppress signals demanding action. Ignoring thirst, hunger, or pain is not passive. It requires continuous neurological effort. Each unmet need triggers inhibition signals that must be actively maintained. You are not resting when you scroll or stare into space. You are holding your body in a controlled state of restraint. This restraint consumes enormous amounts of metabolic and cognitive energy. It is like holding a beach ball underwater with both arms fully extended. The surface looks calm, but the strain underneath is relentless and exhausting. This is why you feel drained despite appearing inactive to everyone else. Your exhaustion is not proof of weakness. It is evidence of prolonged internal resistance. The body cannot sustain this level of suppression without severe cost, so stillness slowly becomes more tiring than movement ever was. And rest becomes impossible inside a system that is constantly breaking itself. 6. Freeze response disrupts interoception and disconnects you from your body. When fight or flight fails, the nervous system activates a more primitive survival response. This response is not panic or escape, but immobilization designed to conserve remaining energy. Your body enters a functional freeze state, often called dorsal vagal shutdown. To maintain this freeze, the brain must reduce awareness of internal bodily signals. Hunger, thirst, temperature, pain, and discomfort are deliberately turned down. This process is known as dampening interoception, your ability to sense the body's state. If you fully felt dehydration, stiffness, or environmental chaos, movement would be unavoidable. But movement is currently registered as dangerous to your nervous system. So numbness becomes a protective adaptation rather than a failure. This explains why self-care feels violently difficult instead of gently restorative. Caring for the body requires re-entering it and feeling what you have been avoiding. But the body has become the container for stress, trauma, and unresolved shame. Re-inhabiting it feels like stepping into a burning building without protection. So avoidance continues, not from indifference, but from self-preservation. The neglect is not apathy. It is armor worn too long. 7. Miscalibrated self-preservation quietly spreads into every area of life. What begins as physical neglect does not remain contained within your body or living space. The nervous system exports this avoidance strategy to every domain it touches. Mail goes unopened, emails accumulate, and important information remains deliberately unseen. An envelope stops being paper and becomes a demand your system cannot safely process. Ignoring it buys temporary peace by pushing reality further into the future. The same pattern appears in medical care, where subtle warning signs are quietly postponed. You are not afraid of doctors. You are afraid of re-entering a body you abandoned. So, you wait until pain becomes urgent enough to break the freeze. In work, this shows up as shrinking rather than failing outright. You stay beneath your capacity because visibility feels more dangerous than stagnation. Ambition requires presence, and presence demands energy you no longer have. Socially, messages go unanswered because every question opens a loop you cannot close. How are you? Becomes impossible to answer honestly or falsely without cost. So, relationships starve slowly, confirming a belief that isolation is safer. By minimizing input everywhere, you also eliminate the sources that sustain life. 8. Safety slowly turns into a prison you cannot leave. This survival strategy works exactly as designed, keeping you alive by minimizing exposure and demand. But over time, the same mechanism preserves a version of you that cannot fully live. The bunker meant to protect you becomes a place where movement feels increasingly impossible. You filter out the world to stay safe, but you also filter out relief and repair. Clutter, unpaid bills, missed messages, and declining health reveal the same frozen logic. They are not separate failures. They are expressions of one nervous system decision. The decision was to stop feeling, because feeling once became too expensive. Stillness reduced pain in the short term, but it quietly erased possibility over time. What was meant to last minutes has stretched into months, sometimes years. The cost is not just disorder or fatigue, but the erosion of personal agency. Each ignored signal teaches the brain that intention has no effect on reality. Eventually, tasks stop feeling difficult and start feeling impossible altogether. Safety hardens into confinement, and protection becomes suffocation. You survive by stopping, but stopping was never meant to be a permanent state. And now, the strategy that saved you is the very thing holding you captive. This is not self-sabotage or a hidden desire to fail your own life. It is self-preservation that lost calibration under prolonged stress and unresolved threat. No one is coming to deliver a signal that it is finally safe to move. That signal does not exist outside you, waiting to be discovered. It must be generated internally, inside the discomfort you learn to avoid. The room may stay messy, the body may feel heavy, and fear may remain present. But safety will not arrive before movement. Movement is what creates safety again. So the question is not whether you are capable of change. The question is how much longer you can afford to remain this protected.